Sean and I met like several years ago, 2018, 19, like
Something like that, yeah.
pre-COVID, yes. And then we worked on a few projects together since then. And this is the first time making music together in person, which doesn't really feel like it because we've known each other quite some time. He is a Meiyoshi Han, which is his highest rank of shakuhachi tradition, and he is my shakuhachi teacher. And I learned so much about Japanese culture, Japanese aestheticism, Japanese music from him. And he was the one who inspired me to go back to my musical roots. And my sort of artistic voice, my artistic sort of input is really based on around, the interaction that I had with him, interaction that I had with this instrument. So I'm really excited to share with you all this man. So without further ado, Sean, would you mind maybe briefly introduce yourself? And I think we are interested in how you really came into this instrument.
Well, first off, I want to say thank you for having me. And like he said, this is our first time making music. But when that first note came out for us that the orchestra was together with the shakuhachi, it just felt so natural and really easy. So even though it's such a difficult piece, I mean, this guy makes it really easy. So you guys are really lucky to have him here in Bloomington. So as he said, my name is Sean Tairyu Head. I am American, obviously, but you wouldn't know by the clothes. But I really had always had an affinity for Asian culture when I was a kid. I remember even the first time seeing Asian characters. I can't even remember what language it was. I'm pretty sure it was either Chinese or Japanese. And I just asked my mom, what's that up there? And she's like, I don't know. It's probably Asian. Very good observation, Mother. Thank you so much. But later I would find out that those were kind of the languages I was really interested in. It was also the culture I was really interested in. So I loved watching animation. I was a huge Dragon Ball fan, Dragon Ball Z. I wear those badges with pride as loving an anime. And I also loved old samurai films. But there was at one point at the bottom of the screen that I was stuck. I could only read the subtitles to understand what was happening in the shows. So part of it was I really wanted to learn the language so that I could actually watch the anime. I could actually watch the films without having to constantly look down and rewind to see what they were saying. But inside those films, this instrument was heavily used to color the scenes. And so one of the most popular colors that is used in that is this sound. And so I can see the heads nodding. He's like, I know that sound. And I didn't know that this was the instrument. And so later I saw this instrument and I saw someone playing it and I thought, that's the thing I want to learn. Meanwhile, up until that time, I had been studying violin and viola, composition, and I even got myself into a really nice music school before I even graduated high school. But then I just started playing it. I thought nothing of it. I just, loved playing the instrument, and lo and behold, it became the thing I do as a career. Amazingly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's amazing. The special thing about Sean is not only he's very knowledgeable about Japanese culture, Japanese aestheticism, or Japanese music, but he speaks like a really random guy from Osaka prefecture. And there's a strong dialect, Kansai Ben. And then, when I spoke to him for the first time in Japanese, I was so shocked. Why is this guy speaking like my, relative from Osaka? And it was interesting. We made, I don't know if you remember this, but we made a few video series when we were working together in Japan on aestheticism, the Japanese aestheticism. They're, really interesting philosophical idea of a Japanese aestheticism. And you will hear and feel in this piece that we're going to play. But he would make those films in Japanese, in Kansai Ben. It was so funny. So just speaking of those Japanese aestheticism, you have such a prolific, extended training in Western music. You went to conservatory. What would you say, like the main difference when we were perceiving like Western art, Western music versus, you know, Eastern or Eastern music, or even like Japanese music, Japanese art?
Yeah, the Japanese aesthetic is very interesting. In our Western world, we are dominated by tonic, pre-tonic, dominant, and tonic once returned. So that's basically very fancy language to say 1, 4, 5, 1, and then repeat, 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 repeat. That is the essence and the backbone of classical music. And some would even just argue and say it's just 1 and 5. It's tonic and dominant, and then back to the tonic again. And so this harmonic structure, since the days of Bach, is what has really defined the voice of Europe. But in Japan, they don't have necessarily the tonic-dominant relationship in the same sense that we do. Now, they do have that kind of relationship, and you can hear it in the music, but both the tonic and the dominant have stopping locations, which means that you can end on either one, and it feels right. It feels complete. So the best way I could probably explain is that Western music is highly goal-oriented. It's always moving forward and wants to go to the next place to express the next idea. Where Japanese music rather wants to stay on the single note and the single tone and express that idea through tone colors. So the way that the sound of that individual note develops and changes over time is much more interesting than the way that in the West we would say how the harmony develops over time.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think you will hear definitely in the piece that we're going to play this idea of a single sound. And even that sound disappears and there's a silence, you feel something that kind of resonates you during this silence. You know, my favorite composer, Japanese composer Takemitsu, would say that the silence is as intense as the sound that you hear. And you really feel you get to experience that in this piece that we're going to play. But before we jump into the piece, I would love to sort of get to know Sean more with you all. You know, you've lived in Japan for how many years?
That's right, 6 years, just under 6 years.
6 years, and you went to Japan, you know, on the tour, performing there. What would you say, like, the most memorable moment that you had with this instrument?
The most interesting moment was actually a collection of hikes that I did with one of my best friends in Japan. He's a Buddhist monk and has been living in Japan for now over 25 years. And one of the things that I loved doing with this instrument was I loved to just train my body with it. So I would hike up mountains and play the flute at the same time, you know, play pieces in different parts of the winter, like dead of winter. And I think the most memorable moment was the first time we went hiking. We were in full kimono garb, but it was like -2 degrees outside. It was very cold. And we hiked up one of the main mountains in Nara to the top where you could see the entire, basically all of Nara city, all of Katsuragi and some other cities as well. And even though it was so brutally cold at the top of the mountain, I mean, when I looked over at my friend's face, I'm like, wow, this place is so gorgeous. It's just so beautiful. And his head is red as a tomato, right? and then we're starting to get down, and then I felt it. I felt like, wow, that was really cold. And as I'm walking down the mountain, and we're still stopping and playing our flutes a couple places, again, it's -2 degrees. These things ain't moving fast. One of my slippers broke, and so I had to do the rest of the hike barefoot. When I got to the bus stop, I sat there, and he's sitting next to me, and I was looking at my arm, and I was like, I wonder how fast I can close this. And it didn't move. And I was like, uh-oh. But it was like a really incredible experience to push my body to the limits. And I think it was a physical representation of what we do sonically in music, is how far can I push the music sonically to make something digestible for my audience member, that they can really hear the narration and the story that goes along with it. So that's probably the most vivid memory I have of Japan.
That's.
You want to go with me?
Maybe not. I don't deal with the cold. As you know, some of the BSO folks, it's just brutal to survive through this winter in Bloomington. And
I mean, we can go in the summer when it's 95% humidity and 104 degrees.
true.
I mean, it's a good time. Your flute will be very sharp.
That's true. Yes, yes. Living in Japan is some sort of life exercise sometimes. Um, but no, that's great. One another thing I'm curious about, because you are also one of the few teachers, shakuhachi teachers, who teach this instrument to not only just Japanese people like me, but also you introduce these instruments to the people from around the world. As a teacher, or even as you were a student, you were taking lessons from various Japanese masters. Are there any sort of differences in teaching between the sort of Western style of teaching and Japanese style of teaching? And do you think that sort of has some reflection on the Japanese culture, the teaching?
Yeah, I definitely in the West. I mean, we've developed the idea of the conservatory, and so we can teach things systematically. You know, as Westerners, we love to systemize things. We like to, find the truth of it. We like to identify the historical moments. Myth, though we have it, we don't relish in myth as much as the East does. So we're more interested in what is factually true, what is how it is done. I think of a very common German aesthetic of the 19th century, for example, which is Werktreue, probably saying it terribly, but it means faithfulness to the work, which is where we try to not do anything of our own doing, but we want to see exactly what does the score say and what is the composer's original intention. This, for example, is so intense in the West that even Czerny, when he would improvise on a 5/6/4 chord of Beethoven's piano concerto, he was a student of Beethoven, by the way, the critics said, "You don't mess with God's music." And so it's like, but I studied with him. He did that. But we really love systemizing in the West. Now, in the East, there is a different approach, which is basically, that's what my teacher did. And so to break away from that's what my teacher did is very difficult, but it's not systematized, because every teacher will do it different. Every school has a very different interpretation of even the same pieces that are shared. And as far as even teaching pedagogically, it's much more of just do what I say and do what I do, not so much, here's how it's done. Just watch me and then copy. A good example of this is one of the famous shakuhachi teachers, Yamaguchi Goro, would play the piece for the student the first week. Then he would let the student play, and he would play with them on the second week. And then on the third week, he would sing with the student. And on the fourth week, he would let the student play alone. And he'd say, "Good, now polish it." There was not much. Basically, all the words he said was "good." Now polish it. So not a lot of verbal explanation on the pieces as much as we would in the West.
Yeah, I can relate to that. When I was, I don't know, for those who don't know me, I used to race motorcycle. And my coach was my dad. And he...
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Yes. And, he doesn't really say anything other than the fact, do well, do better. Do well, do better. And just this kind of repetition of things is something that is very inherent in Japanese sort of teaching style. And by the way, if you, after this concert, are interested in learning the shakuhachi, he has a really great studio. And not only just in-person lessons, he has 1,000 of YouTube videos that you can watch. And I highly recommend you all to go watch some of the videos. And if you start, wanting to learn this instrument, it's really accessible. Right?
I think it's very accessible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to say it's difficult, and then it'll scare them off.
Right, that's right. So maybe, since you all here a little earlier, would you, Sean, mind maybe just sharing some of the snippets of what this instrument sounds like Just a few examples of technique that you're going to use in this Hosokawa's piece, and maybe explain, because there are a lot of symbolism with this instrument in relation to Japanese culture or Japanese nature. Maybe you can. I don't know, sorry, I didn't really put you in the question thing, but it's sort of
I think there's a question somewhere in there.
Okay.
I can find it.
Okay, great,
All right,
great,
I'll search. The instrument, the shakuhachi instrument, I like to say it has 4 voices. All right, this is 4 voices. The first voice is the chant voice. So the chant voice would come from something like in Buddhism where they would chant a sutra. So for example, they have the Hanya Shingyo, which is the Heart Sutra. So you have Busetsu-maka Hanya Haramita Shingyo, something like this. That kind of voice, more a little bit of monotone, holding the sound of it, but like listening to the color of the vowels change. The second one is the voice of shomyo, which is the liturgical singing of Japanese Buddhism. It sounds something like this. Nyorai kedo ete salarim juni kakure shi ni. Something like that. Then we'll have the voice of nature, and then we'll have the voice of special effects. So I'll show you first the simplest one, which is basically usually a single tone, and that sounds like this. Now we have the voice of shomyo. The voice of nature. And then my favorite, the special effects. So something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's great. Maybe this is a good moment to shift our conversation to the piece that we're going to play.
Yes.
So this is called Autumn Wind by Toshio Hosokawa. He's a living Japanese composer based in Berlin and also in Japan. Yeah, would you like to maybe talk about the piece and maybe the composer?
Yes, we're doing Autumn Wind in Spring. There's a very interesting reason for that too. Last year, spring was calling and we had a baby. And so then we had to move the concert to the spring because we actually had our 3rd daughter on August 21st of last year. So there was no way that we were flying from Japan with a 2-month-old to make this happen. So we had to move it. But even though it is Autumn Wind, I think that has to do more of when it was composed. So autumn is when he composed it, basically the end of September. And then he chose wind, I believe, because it's with the shakuhachi. But the piece really can fit at any time of the year because it's an expression of nature. And so, how many of you have been hiking out in the woods or camping? Right? Oh, that's great. Sometimes I go into a city and then no one raises their hands. I'm like, who has been outside? Now, in those hiking times, one of the things that you get to experience is all the different sounds of the birds. Right? All the different sounds of different types of winds that go against different types of trees. Every once in a while you hear like a wild boar and then you run afterwards. And then of course you get the sound of water and sound of rocks, things kind of cracking and moving and flowing. And that's exactly what you're going to hear in this piece. You're not going to hear that 1, 4, 5, 1. At least I don't think so. It might be there, but I've never heard it. It is very, very dense harmonically. There's so much happening. There's a lot of really close notes. I wish we had the violinist up here to kind of do like the sounds.
Right.
But like that, when you hear those effects in the music, you're going to hear like the string players push. It's called overpressure. They push really hard on the bow, and it kind of sounds like it's cracking or like a creaking door. But it's like the sounds of like a tree almost like, loosening a limb or something like that. And then you'll hear like the brass players in the back going, shh, and it's not because the other brass players are being loud. I know that's usually the case, but this is actually because they want to create different types of effects of like the distant ocean or, wind going through the pines and so on and so forth. So it's like a collage of different types of sounds that we would hear in nature, but it's just done inside the concert hall with all these amazing instruments. And then the lone shakuhachi solo, to me, it's like the voice of man. Sometimes it's of in praise of just, wow, God, this thing that you've made for us, how beautiful is this creation that you've given us. And then other times it's like, oh my God, why did you make tsunamis? This is terrifying. And you get like all of the range of nature in this one piece. It's really quite something.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, obviously going to be slightly different than like normal, classical music, seeing as you said, like, the Western, tradition.
There's no major chords there.
Right.
There's no major chords.
Yeah. So, but if you just let that notion if you just stay away from that notion for a second and you just immerse yourself into this piece, I assure you, you will hear at least something that you can recognize from that work in the nature.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I have to defend the piece, even though it's very avant-garde. I think that it has to come with just a different approach. Like when we go to a classical music concert, a lot of times we think, okay, yeah, there's Mozart, there's Beethoven, there's Bach, or Brahms. I love Brahms. We have this sort of like the same composers that we hear all the time of a wonderful tradition of harmonic music. But this requires a different type of listening, which is you're not trying to find where the person is wanting to go in their composition. There is no goal. That's the most important thing to know about this music. There is no goal. It's just, like, so for example, back to the people that were hiking. When you get to the lake and you're kind of sitting there, what's the goal of sitting at the lake? Sitting at the lake, right? I want to just enjoy what's around me. And, sometimes the caribou come out, sometimes the birds come out, and you just enjoy whatever sound comes. And this is the same way this piece is to be enjoyed, is that as you sit back, even close your eyes, even take a nap by the lake, right? Let the sounds come by and say, yeah, that really reminds me of this experience that I had, and I heard that same sort of sound out in nature. And I think that's the true intention behind pieces like this.
Absolutely. And you don't really also feel like 1, 2, 3, 4, the metric thing.
It's in 4.
Yeah.
But I don't feel it.
Right. So it's really, I think a different experience that I'm really excited to share.
Yeah, it's always great to share experiences like this because it's not the type of, my friend runs a radio station, which is not your grandmother's classical music. This is definitely not your grandmother's classical music.
Definitely. Great. Well, shall we take a few questions from the
Absolutely,
audience?
I love questions.
Yeah. Yes.
So I see you wiggling your head sometimes. Is that articulating and you also articulate this way?
Yeah, I would like to say that it's a neurological condition, but it's not. It's actually the techniques of the shakuhachi, the movements from left to right is actually how I create vibrato. And it's actually helps to create a vibrato that's much closer to the human voice, where the vibrato goes up and down, not just down and up like a violin or a viola. Great question.
Any other questions? Yes, back there.
Earlier you mentioned when the weather's really warm, it'll make the flute sharp. Do you have a way of compensating for that, or does it matter?
Prayer. There's not really much you can do at that point. It just is, especially when it's very hot. Like this room is very dry, right? Not just the acoustics are okay, but I mean like the actual air itself is dry. The moisture is very low. So that also affects the instrument. It's hard to reverberate more. But yeah, you just gotta find a way to, make it work basically.
Any other question?
It's a very beautiful audience, but they're very shy. Yes.
Okay, I have a question for you, Sean.
Okay, I'm ready.
How was your experience working with the BSO?
Oh, it was awful. I mean, they were so rude, mean. I was crying after the first rehearsal. I couldn't even start my car.
Yeah, that's right. I saw you crying.
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, we showed up at this beautiful little bungalow that you guys procured for us, and this lovely gift basket. And they knew that my daughters were coming, so there was like children's books in there and all these sort of things. It was wonderful. My wife was just elated that the orchestra had omotenashi, right? That true hospitality. And of course, in working with all the musicians, you would never think that this is just some community orchestra. They sound really great. You've got really great players. It was very easy to work with everybody. They're very responsive. They listen well. I mean, you've trained them well. You've trained them well.
I didn't do anything, honestly. Yeah. Well, thank you.
But I saw that you have a bunch of like snacks underneath your stand. Do you like give them snacks when they do good?
Do I? They said no.
Something must be in the water.
Well, yeah, I guess we go out after the rehearsal sometimes. That's a good snack. But
Are you paying for everybody?
any other questions before we close off with Sean?
Okay, so the question is, if like somebody coming from the Western world would be easier for a flutist or a clarinetist, and it's equally difficult. The embouchure that we have for this instrument, it's just a gigantic hole, so it's more like a rim blown flute than it is anything else. So the technique in the embouchure, like for more wind players, they try to curve in and blow into the flute, where we're blowing over. Like kind of like over a beer bottle, that's the same kind of technique that we are using for making the sound. So it's just such a different approach that I don't think that there's, there's an advantage when you come from any other instrument.
Alrighty. Well, thank you again, Sean, for
Absolutely.
coming here for a talk, and thank you all for stopping by a little earlier. And I'm really excited to share Autumn Wind with Sean and introduce a little bit of a snapshot of my country. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, everyone. So great to see you all. My name is Ryo Hasegawa. I'm the music director of the BSO, who's very, very, very happy that finally spring is here in Bloomington. You know, one of the essential items for me to survive through winter here in Bloomington is this weighted blanket. I cannot sleep without it during the winter, but in the past couple of days, I don't need it anymore, which tells me the spring is here. I believe tonight's program has pretty much everything the BSO has to offer to the community of Bloomington. And it's special for me too, particularly because I get to share a little bit of my musical roots as a part of this program. And then my hope is that by the time when you get out of the concert hall, there's something that will stay in the rest of your musical life. So to start off this unique program, we are very excited to share the extraordinary talent. The BSO's concerto competition winner, Ella Hightower, will play this fearless, energetic Dvorak violin concerto movement #1. So please give a warm welcome to Ella on the stage for her BSO debut. So for next piece, many of us probably had an experience of suddenly travel back in time to a very specific moment of our lives. And then it might be something, from yesterday or from last year, from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 60 years ago. But it's often triggered by something very small, certain smell or certain scenery you just happen to see, or certain words that people say, certain piece of music, or even certain way that wind moves through the air. And when that happens, it's almost like a time travel, and it usually comes unexpectedly. And those moments sort of show us a small snapshot of your previous life. And those moments are typically very quiet and simple and beautiful. So several moments in the piece that you're about to hear bring back to me something very personal, yet very ordinary moment that I shared with my grandfather when I was 6 years old. And I'm really grateful and humbled to be able to share that personal moment with you and with BSO and with my friend soloist Sean Tairyu Head. Sean is a Meiyo Shihan, which is this highest rank, honorary rank of this tradition of shakuhachi, the bamboo flute. He and I met maybe several years ago. We worked on a few projects together since then, and this is my privilege to make a music with him for the first time. And he's actually my own shakuhachi teacher as well. So I'm going to introduce him, bring him on stage, and have him talk about the piece and instruments a little bit. So without further ado, please welcome Sean Tairyu Head.
Wow. Bill, you didn't tell me the audience was going to be this beautiful. All right. Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a wonderful pleasure to share the traditional Japanese music as well as new compositions for the shakuhachi, and of course to be with my friend here, Ryo, with this awesome theater and wonderful musicians. It's just a great pleasure in general. The piece. I can answer it for you if you'd like. It's good that it's now instead of the silence. The piece that we're about to hear, Autumn Wind, is not like most of the pieces that you've probably ever heard before. It's not going to be filled with Western-style harmonies of major and minor. You might not even have a recognizable melody that you'll be able to take home with you. But what you will get is the unadulterated sound of nature interpreted through instruments. Such sounds would be a sound as like the overpressure effect on the violin, and I was wondering if I could ask you to give us that overpressure effect. Ah, yes, the language of my people. Now, that might just sound like noise to you, but what I hear is I hear the creaking oak in nature. And if I hear the brass players give us that shush, can we give a little bit of the shush? That's not them telling me to be quiet. That is the wind effect. And those are sort of the sounds that you're going to hear. So you could try to find a melody. And there certainly are melodic fragments that are throughout the piece, but that's not the point of the piece. The point of the piece, rather, is that the orchestra is going to give us the sound of nature, and the shakuhachi will give you the sound of man's voice. Praying and thanking God for creation and how beautiful things are, and also asking for help when nature seems to fight back. And so I hope that you enjoy this wonderful experience of sound and tone and color by Toshio Hosokawa, Autumn Wind. say, truly, that was like the best we've ever played it. That was amazing, guys. Seriously, that was so good. I still got goosebumps. So now for something very different. I arranged a children's song for a little encore. So this is a piece called Nanatsu no Ko, which means 7 little children. I guess this is like a Freudian thing that I want 7 children. I have 3 right now, but I'll have to convince my wife later. But it's a beautiful little tune, and I just would love to share that with you all for the love that I have for my children, love that I have for playing this instrument, and the new love I have for Bloomington.
So the piece that you just heard is called Flower of Mandara. It's based on the Buddhist story. It's a tone poem composed by Kosaku Yamada. Yamada was one of the first Japanese composers who studied abroad in Europe to learn European music. And he brought back European tradition to Japan, and he had a huge impact on Japanese music after Meiji Restoration. And he was largely influenced by music of Richard Strauss when he was studying in Germany. So you probably heard some of the, hint of Strauss music, and that's one of the reasons why I paired these Japanese masters with Strauss tonight for this program, because there's so many connections philosophically, musically. Next two songs that we're going to present are the songs by Richard Strauss. First one is Alle Seelen by mezzo-soprano Daniel Long, and that is followed by Morgan, sung by soprano C.E. Young. So hope you enjoy it. So please welcome Daniel Long on the stage. to close off tonight's program, we are once going back to Richard Strauss music and with the scenes from the Rosenkavalier. At the heart of this opera is almost like a meditation on time, how people grow, how love changes, and how sometimes the most generous act is simply to let someone go. So we're doing two scenes tonight. One, and it's both sort of the beginning and the ending of this emotional journey. We're gonna do first the presentation of Rose, this duet, when the young couples meet for the first time, and that is followed by the closing trio, where the three voices intertwine with each other in the most transcending ending in all opera, in my opinion. So, yes, let's do the presentation of Rose, and let's welcome back Daniel Long and C. Young. this is like a dream for a conductor to be able to do this Strauss music with fantastic singers. So I'm absolutely awe. So before we do the very, very last final trio, I would like to thank our partner for this concert tonight, Asian Culture Center, for bringing Sean to this concert and Sean to Bloomington. And I would also like to thank BSO musicians for your willingness to explore this program, and with a bit of my personal musical roots, and I'm really grateful for your openness. And of course, I would like to thank you all for coming here tonight. And as you saw, there's a lot the BSO can offer to the Bloomington, and I would really love for you to consider being a part of this journey, or part of our family, through simply just donating for us to thrive. Or you can play in the orchestra. Yes, you can. Or you can tell your friends and family about our upcoming concert on May 16th, featuring 100+ singers on our chorus on Beethoven's monumental 9th Symphony. Yeah, you don't want to miss that. And it's gonna be at Musical Arts at IU Mac. So again, thank you again so much for coming and letting us share music tonight. Let me introduce the one more additional soprano singing the role of Marceline, Rachel Spodek.
Thank you.